A $125,000 reward is being offered to anyone with information that'll lead to an arrest and conviction in Wells's death. Meanwhile, the results of an independent autopsy commissioned by Wells's family is expected to be released tomorrow.
A boat, a crowd, a back turned to the camera, blue swim trunks. Nobody filming it that day thought it mattered. Now it might be the last footage that exists of Nolan Wells, alive, and it surfaced at the exact moment the world is about to find out how he died. Today, stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why a single pair of swim trunks has an entire family, a civil rights attorney, and the NAACP watching a clock. You already know his name. You've seen the headlines, the vigils, the reward posters. Maybe you've argued about this case with someone in your own family, but you have not seen this video broken down piece by piece, and you have not heard how it lines up, or doesn't, with everything else this family has been fighting to prove for the last 2.5 weeks. There's a deleted phone in this story. There's a second video. One most people talking about this case haven't even mentioned yet. There's a sheriff and a civil rights attorney giving two versions of the same afternoon that don't quite match, and there's a press conference happening today that could either close this case or completely reopen it. So let's go back to the water. Back to the 4th of July. Back to the last afternoon anyone can account for. Horn Island sits off the coast of Ocean Springs, Mississippi. No buildings, no running water, no staff. You get there one way, by private boat, and if something goes wrong out there, you're on your own. On the 4th of July, it was packed. Dozens of boats, music, coolers, the kind of scene where everyone knows somebody but nobody's really watching anybody. People described it later as boats stacked almost on top of each other. Loud, crowded, chaotic in the way holiday weekends on the water always are. Nolan was there with a group of friends, high school friends, people who'd known him for years, the kind of friends you'd assume would notice if something was wrong. By 3 o'clock, they say that was it. The last time anyone in that group saw him standing on that island. An hour and a half later, the group he was with pulled away from the island. They say their boat was taking on water, a bilge pump problem, mechanical trouble, nothing more. And they say Nolan made a choice to stay behind and catch a ride with somebody else later, with a different group entirely. That's the official version. That's what's been said publicly, more than once by more than one source, including the family's own account of what they were initially told. But here's the question nobody in that group has ever fully answered. Why him? Out of everyone on that island. Why was Nolan the one left standing on the sand while his friends drove away? Why didn't someone wait? Why didn't someone double back? Nobody has explained that part. Not really. And that gap, that unexplained gap, is where this entire case has been living for weeks. A classmate who was out on a different boat that same day later said something that stuck with a lot of people following this case. He pointed to a stretch of water near the island where the current runs strong. Strong enough, he said, to pull someone under before they even realized what was happening. If that's what happened, it's a tragedy. A pure accident. A young man alone on a stretch of coastline that doesn't forgive mistakes. But if is doing a lot of work in that sentence. And the family has spent every day since the 4th of July trying to figure out whether if is the truth or whether it's just the easiest explanation available. That night, Nolan didn't come home. His mother, Kristen, did what any mother would do. She called, she waited. Then she called the people who could actually search. The Coast Guard, local authorities, anyone who would listen. 2 days. That's how long it took. On the morning of July 6th, a park ranger found him in the water, near the northwestern tip of the island. 18 years old. A wide receiver. Somebody who was supposed to be back on a football field for his college team in a matter of weeks. His father would later describe him as an elite athlete, someone who could swim, someone who knew the water. Instead, His name was on a missing person report, and then it wasn't a missing person report anymore. Authorities came out fairly quickly and said they believed it was a drowning. They said there was no evidence, at that point, of foul play. And that single sentence, no evidence of foul play, is the one Nolan's family has been pushing back against ever since. Not because they've proven it wrong, but because they say it was said too soon, before the investigation had really even started. Think about the order of events for a second. A body is found on a Monday morning. Within days, not weeks, days, the public is told there's nothing suspicious here. To a grieving family, that timeline alone raised more questions than it answered. Within days, the family brought in civil rights attorney Ben Crump. If that name sounds familiar, it should. He's the attorney families call when they don't trust the version of events they're being handed, and almost immediately, Crump started laying out a list of things that didn't sit right with him. First, the phone. Crump says Nolan's friends left the island with his phone still in their possession. And by the time the family got that phone back, messages on it had already been deleted. Not lost, not corrupted, deleted. Second, the footage. Separate from the new video everyone's talking about now, there's another piece of video Crump has referenced publicly. He describes it as an altercation. Nolan and someone else, yelling at one another on a boat at some point that day. Crump has said that footage existed while investigators were telling the family there was no sign of anything suspicious. Third, and this one's simple, but it stuck with people, Crump has publicly asked why it wasn't Nolan's own friends who called it in. Why they left him behind, kept his phone and his keys, and didn't report him missing themselves. It was Nolan's mother who made the call that night, not the friends he'd spent the day with. The sheriff's office has pushed back on the framing. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has said that initial interviews suggest Nolan made the decision to stay and that his friends believed, genuinely believed, he'd catch a ride with somebody else. He said the friends have been cooperating with an investigation that is still, as of right now, active. Two different stories, not necessarily contradicting each other on the facts, but landing in two very different places on what those facts mean. One version paints a chaotic, unlucky afternoon. The other paints a group of people who left a young man behind and never fully accounted for why. And here's the detail that a lot of casual observers of this case have missed entirely. Nolan's friends have retained their own legal representation. Crump himself has said he hasn't spoken directly to the young men who were with Nolan that day, because by the time his team got involved, lawyers were already standing between the family and any direct answers. That's not proof of guilt. People lawyer up for all kinds of reasons, including simply being told to by their own families. But it does mean that, weeks later, the group who was physically present for Nolan's final hours has never spoken publicly, in their own words, about what actually happened.
This video obtained by TMZ shows the back of a black man on a boat during a large party on July 4th. The man is wearing blue swim trunks, similar to this photo of Nolan Wells that was also taken that day 10 miles off of Mississippi's coast. Those in the group Wells was with told authorities they last saw him around 3 p.m., 30 minutes after the video was taken. They say he chose to stay behind for a girl. His mother reported him missing later that night, and his body was discovered 2 days later.
There were so many people. I mean, boats, they were like on top of each other almost. It was intense.
And then there's the part of this story that made it national. Nolan was black. The friends he was with that day have been reported as white. Crump didn't dance around that. He's invoked Mississippi's history directly, the state where Emmett Till was killed, and said the family doesn't trust that this gets investigated the same way it would somewhere else. The Reverend Al Sharpton put it even more bluntly, standing next to the family, saying you cannot have law enforcement announcing there's no foul play before an investigation has actually run its course. The NAACP's national board agreed enough to act on it. On July 18th, they passed a resolution, pushing for federal involvement, pushing for full transparency, pushing for this not to quietly disappear. By this point, The case had stopped being a local story.
What happened to Nolan and began hearing what was pieced together, it is clear that this situation must have the most thorough and objective investigation to lead to justice. What we've been told does not make sense. And being that there is lack of confidence in the local authorities, who have already, in my judgment, seemed to have mishandled where it was going, because to just immediately, before a week time, saying there was nothing done wrong, when we hear that this young man was engaged in some kind of argument that was on tape, that his cell phone and keys ended up with one of the people that were there on the island and got away. He was one black with three young white men who happened to end up with his phone, happened to end up with his keys. Then there's just too many questions that they should not be closing the investigation.
Colin Kaepernick stepped in to help fund an independent autopsy. Tyler Perry covered funeral costs. And a reward, $125,000, went up, funded jointly by Sharpton, Perry, and former NFL player Terrell Owens. Money on the table for anyone with information leading to an arrest and a conviction. That's not a small-town story anymore. That's a story with national money and national names attached to it. Nolan was buried on July 20th in Ocean Springs, at the church his family calls home. His parents stood up in front of everyone who came and talked about the version of him the headlines never show. Quiet, a little corny, the kind of kid who made people laugh without trying. His mother told the crowd they'd miss everything about him. Not the highlight reel, everything. The next day, Crump's office confirmed the timing everyone following this case had been waiting on. The independent autopsy, the one funded through Colin Kaepernick's organization, conducted separately from the state, was finished. The preliminary results would be announced 2 days after the funeral in Chicago at the NAACP's National Convention. And then, right in that window, after the funeral, right before the results, this video surfaces. Here's what's actually in it. The footage, obtained by TMZ, shows the back of a man on a boat in the middle of that same crowded scene on July 4th. Blue swim trunks. The same style, the same color, as trunks Nolan was photographed wearing that day, in images taken roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi coast. Nobody in that video turns around. Nobody says his name. It's a few seconds, a back, a crowd, a boat rocking in the water. But if the timing lines up the way it's being reported, if this is from the same window of time everyone's been trying to reconstruct, then this might be the closest thing anyone has to seeing Nolan Wells in the final stretch of his life. Think about that for a second. A boy who loved football, who made corny jokes, who was supposed to suit up again this season. Reduced to a few seconds of someone else's vacation footage, because nobody at that party knew they were filming the last frames of a life. That's not proof of anything. It doesn't tell you what happened next. It doesn't tell you who he talked to or what was said or how the day actually ended for him. What it does is put a face, or at least a back, and a pair of swim trunks on everything that's been argued about in press conferences and legal statements for weeks. It makes it real in a way that quotes from lawyers never quite do. There's something almost unbearable about it, honestly. A crowded boat. Music probably playing somewhere in the background. Somebody's holiday footage, filmed for no reason at all, just because that's what people do now. Film everything. And buried in the middle of a scene that was supposed to mean nothing, there might be Nolan. Alive. Unaware that in a matter of hours, he'd be the reason a park ranger was searching the water 2 days later? That's the part of this that's hard to sit with. Not because the video proves anything, it doesn't, but because of how ordinary it is. Right up until you know what came after it. And it dropped at almost the exact moment the next piece of this puzzle was supposed to land. Because today, the same week this video is spreading, Ben Crump was set to reveal the preliminary results of an independent autopsy. A press conference in Chicago. Nolan's parents there, NAACP leadership there. This isn't the state's official autopsy. That one is still being held back, still waiting on toxicology, with no clear date for release. This is a second opinion, one the family paid for, one Crump coordinated through Colin Kaepernick's organization, specifically because they've said they don't trust the state's version to be the full picture. So somewhere out there right now, there may already be an answer to the one question that has hung over this entire case since the 6th of July. What actually happened to Nolan Wells? Was it exactly what it looked like from the outside? A young man alone on an island, caught by a current, in water that people who know that stretch of coastline have described as unforgiving? Or is there something in that independent report that changes the shape of this entire story? Something in the water, something on the body, something that turns a tragic accident into a question for a grand jury. Because remember, Crump has already said this case is headed there eventually to a grand jury. Every piece of evidence collected, every account gathered, all of it eventually laid in front of a jury who will decide whether anyone should be held responsible for what happened on that island. The independent autopsy won't answer that question by itself, but it might be the first real data point that isn't coming from either side of this argument, not from the sheriff's office, and not from the family's attorney. A pathologist doing what pathologists do, looking at a body and telling you, as plainly as science allows, what it can and cannot tell you about how a life ended. We don't get to skip to that answer. Nobody does. Not the public, not the internet, not even most of the reporters who've been covering this for weeks. The family gets it first. Then, the world. What we do have, right now, is a timeline full of gaps nobody's closed yet. A phone that got wiped. A group that left before he did. An altercation nobody's fully explained. And now, a few seconds of blurry footage that might be the last time this camera, or any camera, caught Nolan Wells breathing. If you've been following this case, you already know how fast it's moved. A missing person report turned into a national conversation in a matter of days. A reward fund, a resolution from the NAACP. Now, an independent autopsy, landing the same week as a video nobody expected to see. This story is not finished, not close. And whatever comes out of that press conference, whatever that independent report actually says, it's going to either confirm the version we've been told or blow it wide open. Either way, the Wells family has made one thing clear from the very beginning. They are not going anywhere until they have real answers. Not talking points, not statements, answers. If this case matters to you, if you want to actually know what happens next instead of finding out 3 days late from somewhere else, subscribe to this channel. That's the only way you'll see the update the moment it drops. Nolan Wells was 18. He should be getting ready for a football season right now. Instead, his name is the reason a room full of reporters, attorneys, and family members gathered in Chicago today. We'll be back with what they said. This video is based on publicly reported information from multiple news outlets as of the date of publication. The investigation into Nolan Wells' death remains active and ongoing. No cause or manner of death has been officially confirmed by authorities at the time this video was made. No individual has been named a suspect or accused of any crime. Statements attributed to the family, their attorney, or the NAACP reflect their positions and have not been independently verified by law enforcement. This video will be updated as new, verified information becomes available,